I spent 1 year at what they call Travis Air Force Base, which is outside of San Francisco, California. It's between San Francisco and Sacramento, California. And sometimes I flew Army people to Alaska. You know how nice and warm it is in California? And when we went to Alaska, we had to wear bigger, heavier clothes than we wear here in Minnesota. So we would drop the Army people off and they would practice up in Alaska. Then for 3 years, when slowly those airplanes had to go closer and closer to Vietnam, I was very, very lucky, and I spent 3 years at Hickam Air Force Base, which is Honolulu, Hawaii. So I had a good time for 4 years. Okay, you learned a little bit about the Air Force, you learned a little bit about the Army, you learned a little bit about the Marines and the Navy. Now, because you don't want to hear me talk anymore, I'll bet you some of you have some questions about military.
What do SEALs do?
Well, SEALs, and there's a lot of television shows about Navy SEALs, probably, pal, if every branch of the Air Force, the most elite, the most best trained of all of military people are the Navy SEALs. And if you get a chance, you can watch some movies or you can watch some videos of Navy SEAL training. And probably for every 100 people that to a flying SEAL, one enough to do it. They're the best military people. Thanks for your good morning.
Good morning.
You are who?
Tucker.
Tucker?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tucker. What's your question?
What's your question?
Have you ever been to Pearl Harbor?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. Hey, remember I told you that I was stationed at Hickam Air Force Base? I don't have anything really to write with here, but our runways where the airplanes landed, we actually came in over Pearl Harbor and then landed. And our two bases, Pearl Harbor and Hickam Air Force Base, hooked up to each other. So back, I was in the Air Force, which was the biggest part of Vietnam. There were so many big ships that came in and out of Pearl Harbor. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go on a tour of the Arizona Memorial, which a lot of you probably think of when you think of Pearl Harbor, you think of all the people who died in Pearl Harbor. The Arizona was the biggest that was sunk. And now they have a memorial for Pearl Harbor. Thanks for your question, Tucker. You are who?
Ashley.
And Ashley, are you going to go in the military someday?
No, but maybe the Army.
Maybe the Army? Well, before you ask me your question, I think I have something pretty important. Think about the military. When you go in the military, number one, they pay for all your food. Number two, they pay for your place to stay because they provide lodging for people. Number three, they provide all your uniforms. Number four, you get to travel around. And one of the best things about spending time in the military, when you get out, they pay for your schooling, they pay for your college. So, Ashley, what's your question?
Do you get to keep all your uniforms?
If you rip a uniform or you get a uniform dirty, because those big old airplanes that I flew on, they were really dirty, oily. We could go down and we could turn in for new uniforms. And then whenever you get out of the service, so I was in for 4 years, when you leave the service, then you have to go in what's called the National Guard for 2 more years. So you still have your uniforms, and then by that time, if you totally get out of the service, they let you keep whatever you have.
Huh.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you. Haley.
Haley, hi.
When they built the plane Pluto, why didn't they make the big black nose?
Oh, the big black nose? That's a good question. Even now, Haley, when you go to the airport and you look on the front of a big jet passenger liner, the noses are kind of rounded. Well, what's up in the front of the nose is radar. So that's like a hard plastic shield over the front of the airplane, and inside is the radar, and that's how the pilots can tell where they're going. That's also how the pilots can see if there's any other airplanes around. So the Snoopy one, the black one, which was really about, oh, it was like this big around. That was what was inside of it, was radar. Good question. Thanks for being here, Shirt.
Yep.
Oh, I love it. That's a good one. Hi, who are you?
Bree?
Bree?
Say,
Hi.
Did you ever fight in World War I or World War II?
That's a good question, Bree, and thank you for thinking I'm so old. So, does anybody know when World War I was? Rough guess. Go ahead. Somebody shut them down.
1914 to 1918.
14. That's very, very good. And that's about one of the only things I remember from high school history at Archduke Ferdinand, 1914. So if it were 1914, I would have to be 101 years old, which that I didn't have to worry about. In fact, I was born about the same time that World War II ended. I was born in 1946, and I think the war started Pearl Harbor. What year was Pearl Harbor?
you guys remember that?
Pearl Harbor conflict. They really call it a war. And then Vietnam was supposed to be a conflict because nobody thought that it was going to turn out to be a war. And unfortunately, both turned out to be kind of wars. Good question. What's your question?
Did you buy your uniform?
No, they gave it to us. So that was one of the other nice things. If you go into any service, whether it's the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, they provide you with your uniforms, they provide you with your socks, they provide you with your boots, they provide you with your underwear. And if you go to places that are cold, they boots and gloves and hats and everything. Even when I was in California and I flew the Army people up to Anchorage, Alaska, then they provided me with big, heavy parkas and boots, but I had to give those back. Thanks for your question. Hi. You are who?
Gianna.
Liana, good morning.
Who attacked Pearl Harbor?
Well, on December 7th, 1941, everybody in Hawaii and everybody at Pearl Harbor and everybody at Hickam Air Force Base and a place called Schofield Barracks, actually the whole island of Oahu, they were just having fun. It was sunny, it was nice, it was beautiful. But the Japanese kept a big, huge secret. And on that morning, and there's a great movies out, old movies. One of them is called Tora Tora Tora, and they actually filmed the movie when I was over there in Hawaii. But on that morning, planes started coming in, and people didn't even recognize it. The radar person didn't see them, and planes started coming in, and planes came in, and there were hundreds and hundreds of Japanese airplanes, and they attacked mainly Pearl Harbor, but also all the Air Force bases. And it was a very, very, very bad attack. So that's what started the war.
Thank you. All right, this will be the last question coming up.
I want to say one other thing before I leave. So go ahead. Hi, good morning. I'm so glad that a bunch of girls are answering questions too, or asking questions. So thank you. What's your question?
Did Snoopy get wrecked?
Well, Snoopy, that airplane was a very, very popular airplane. And sometimes, if you're in the library, your media center, or if you're at home, Google. It's called a C-124. C means cargo, dash 124 was the type of airplane. And there were probably, I would guess, 100 of those types of airplanes built. Slowly, you know, like an old car, something, slowly, it gets older and older, and then they brought in these big new jet cargo planes, so they retired them. So I don't think any Snoopies are flying anymore. I think they're just old, like me, they're retired. Okay, so maybe they might have zero strike. But maybe somebody now that, instead of a shovel, this person ride like a little backhoe or something, and maybe he'd have two strike. And then somebody drives a big dump truck. Maybe he or she has three strike. And somebody has to supervise those people, so maybe they have four strike. They're called sergeants. Well, you go all the way up to where Art, the officer, retired Army, who was an officer, he was in charge of a bunch of people as a lieutenant, and then a captain, and then a major, and then a lieutenant colonel, and then a general. So you have all these different ranks. Number one, the more stripes you have, or the higher up you get for me, but also the more responsibility. And everybody, it's kind of like in your school, you have a principal, you have teachers, but everybody can't be a principal and everybody can't be the teacher. People help out, the aides, the people when you go in the cooks in the lunchroom. Look at the janitors who help out to make Byron Elementary School the school that it is. So, you know, kind of keep that in mind. But please, number one, again, I really, really, really enjoyed this. Number two,